الله السميع العليم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، الهادي الرب الرزاق. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. أما بعد. This is the seventh broadcast, the series of broadcasts covering the book حل العقدة في شرح العمدة, which is an explanation of the book Umdatul Fiqh by Al-Allamatul Imam Ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi rahimahullah ta'ala. And this book is a book in the fiqh of Al-Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala, even though, not that it matters, but even though I don't myself, I take the truth from wherever it comes. So if Al-Imam Abu Hanifa's position is the correct position, according to the Quran and Sunnah, that's the position that should be taken. And personally, that's the position that I take. If the position of Al-Imam Malik is the correct position, then that's the position that should be taken. If the position of Al-Imam Shafi'i is the correct position, and that's the position that should be taken. And if the position of Al-Imam Ahmad is the correct position, then that's the position that should be taken. Likewise, the scholars before these four and after these four and during these four. Before these four, for example, like the positions of the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? The first ulama of this ummah. Companions like the six companions like the four Khulafa Rashidin, Abu Bakr wa Umar wa Uthman wa Ali. The companions like the 10 companions promised paradise. Those four Khulafa and other companions like Sa'd, like Zubair, like Abu Ubaidah Jarrah, so on and so forth. Or whether the companions of Ahl al-Badr, or whether Ibn Mas'ud or Ibn Abbas, or those companions that narrated the most hadith, like Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Amr, Abu Hurairah, Aisha, and I'm forgetting one. Or whether the other wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or whether the other scholars of the companions, like Abdullah ibn Zubair, right, and so on and so forth. First and foremost, or like the scholars among the Tabi'in, right, or the other scholars among the Atba' Tabi'in, which is the level of Imam Malik, and the level of Imam Abu Hanifa, or the scholars after them, Abdullah, or their time, Abdullah ibn Mubarak, Al-Awza'i, Al-Imamain, Sufyanain, Al-Raziyain, or Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi, Abu Dawood, Al-Nasa'i. Al-Muhim, the important thing is that the truth should be taken wherever it comes from. If you only know the position of Al-Imam Ahmad, then that's what and that's what you take. But once the truth comes to you, you follow the truth. Once the position comes to you that the correct understanding is the understanding of this companion, the correct understanding of it is the understanding of this other scholar because of hadith A, B, and C, because of the ayah and this is the istidlal, because of the principle and so on and so forth. We take the correct position, right? Setting the name of the scholar aside, doesn't matter. So we reading from this book to study our religion, not to be fanatics towards Al-Imam Ahmed or any other Imam. As in previous classes we mentioned, this is the position of Shafi'i, this is the position of Abu Hanifa, this, so on and so forth. This is narrated by Bukhari, this is narrated by Muslim. So with that said, the last class, Barakallahu Feekum, we started the chapter on we started the section on Babu Qada al-Hajati, Babu Qada al-Hajah, right? The section on relieving oneself. The section on relieving oneself. So when a person, these are some questions just as a form of review, bi'idhnillah. When a person wants to use the bathroom, what should he say? What should the person say? And we'll put aside what the author mentioned, and we just stick to what has come in the narration. What has come in the narration is that the person says, "A'udhu billahi min al-khubuthi wal khaba'ith." Okay, that's when the person is about to relieve himself, not simply entering into the bathroom. Right? I mean, entering into the bathroom, the concept of a bathroom, they didn't have that. That wasn't, the concept of using the bathroom, the meaning relieving yourself, not using the bathroom meaning to go and brush your teeth, to go and wash your face. Alaykum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, ya ihsan. These things are not what's meant by qada al-hajah. So if you're going in the bathroom to brush your teeth, to wash your face, to fill up a pail of water to mop, so on and so forth, you don't say this dua, A'udhu billahi min al-khubuthi wal khaba'ith. No. When you're going into the bathroom to urinate or to defecate, that's when you say this dua, Allahumma inni a'udhu billahi min al-khubuthi wal khaba'ith. A'udhu billahi min al-khubuthi wal khaba'ith. Right? What's the supplication that the person says when they finish relieving themselves, and they've got up, they've cleaned themselves and got up, and they're leaving the bathroom area, toilet specifically? We're just talking about what has come in the narration, putting aside the additional stuff that the author has mentioned. The person says ghufranak, right? When a person is entering into the bathroom or the bathroom stall, or in order to relieve himself or herself, what leg does the person put? Excuse me. What leg does the person start? What leg does the person enter with? The left leg. The person exits with the right leg. If a person has a mushaf or a metan, ثلاثة أصول كتاب التوحيد, Alfiyat ibn Malik, poetry and of science of hadith, or Sulan al-Usul, poetry about aqidah, or the metan for Kashf al-Shubuhat, or some kind of tafsir, qawaid tafsir, or Quran or hadith, 40 hadith, Bukhari, and he's memorizing Bukhari and Muslim. He has Bukhari in his pocket, so on and so forth. He has Quran and the different qira'at or something like that. What is it permissible for the person to enter into the stall area, the stall where the toilet is, to relieve himself? Is it permissible? Because entering into what we refer to in the U.S. as a bathroom, right? it's not always the same as entering into a stall, right? If you have a bathroom that has a tub, a sink, a toilet, a closet, that's not the same as entering into a stall where there's only a toilet, right? So a person is entering to relieve himself, right? Let's say stall, not a person is entering into and to sit on the toilet to relieve himself. Is it permissible for the person to sit on the toilet to relieve himself with for example, Bukhari in his pocket, Sahih Muslim? The person has Quran in his pocket-sized Quran. Is it permissible for the person to enter into to relieve himself with this stuff? The answer is no. It's haram. It is haram, right? Except if the person doesn't have any other option, right? You don't have any way to put it, or you have something, and you're afraid that it might get lost or stolen, or you might forget it, and so on and so forth, because of the place, right? In this case, barakallahu fikum, the Sheikh, he says, it's no problem with taking this thing in the area with you to relieve yourself out of necessity. طيب. The author, he says that the person should lean on his left side. The person should lean on his left side to when he's relieving himself. What's the ruling on this? The ruling is that there's a hadith to this effect, but the hadith is weak according to the explainer. The hadith is weak according to the explainers mentioned in Tabarani and Bayhaqi, but the narration has two subhanallah, the narration has two unspecified persons, right? Mubhamain. The mubham is when you mention the person, you don't mention who the person is, right? You say a sheikh told me. That's called mubham, right? A man told me. That's another type of mubham, right? Like this. Or in some other way where it's not clear. A man sitting by a door. Nobody knows who that is, if that person is somebody reliable or not. So this hadith has two such mentions in it, right? And so it's weak about depending on sitting or leaning on the left side. The Sheikh, he said, as a result, the Sheikh, he says, in terms of what they mention about it's more helpful for a person to lean on the left to relieve himself, the Sheikh, he said, this is not necessarily the case. This is not necessarily the case. And this reasoning is more helpful to lean on the left, right? It's more helpful for a person to relieve himself if he leans on the left. That's not a proof. The Sheikh, he says, a person looks to what is appropriate to him. If it's appropriate to lean on the left, he leans on the left. If it's appropriate for him to lean on the right, he leans on the right. And some kind of like recent studies, right? They have these chairs that you kind of like, you sit on the toilet bowl, and not a chair, stools. You sit on the toilet bowl and you put your feet up on like a stool, right? And they mention that because of the positioning of the body, and when you put your feet up and your feet being closer to your stomach and so on and so forth, this helps when you're moving your bowels, this helps you relieve yourself, better, easier, more smoothly, helps prevent hemorrhoids and all of that kind of stuff. They say you put both your feet up on a stool. What's that stool? You know the stool? It's like some kind of toilet stool thing that they selling these days. Anyway, you might put both your feet up. That's the point. You might put both your feet up. Anyway, the Sheikh, he says whatever is more appropriate for a person. If the person relieves, let's say the person is in the woods or in the desert or somewhere, and he needs to relieve himself, what should the person do? What should the person do? In this case, the person should go far away from people and he should cover himself. And the proof of that is that the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or the proof is the actions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Kana either, if the Prophet, when he wanted to relieve himself, he would distance himself from the people and he would cover himself from the eyes of the people until he wasn't visible and you couldn't hear anything. Right? What about barakallahu fikum, if the person is out once again in the woods or so on and so forth, and he needs to, let's say, urinate? What are some of the things that the person has to consider? Sorry. The person should choose a soft place so that the urine doesn't splash back on him, right? What else? Anything else? Yes, the person should not urinate in some kind of animal's hole, right? Or some kind of open in the ground that's for like animals and stuff like that. Nor should the person relieve himself or defecation. You shouldn't defecate in some hole that looks like it's for a snake or a rat or, nor in the paths, nor in the shade that people might use, nor should a person relieve himself under a fruit bearing or vegetable bearing. Are there trees that have vegetables? I don't know if trees have vegetables. I know they have fruit. Allahu alam. Any kind of tree that bears peas. Any kind of tree that any sort of tree that bears some kind of harvest, fruit, vegetables, nuts, right? Cashews growing trees and other. So a person shouldn't relieve himself under a tree like this, right? There's a hadith to this effect about a person avoiding places that people curse the individuals that use them. What about facing the sun or the moon? There's a hadith that says don't face the sun or the moon, the two lights, but it's weak. This hadith is weak. An-Nawawi said it's a false hadith. Ibn Salah said this hadith is unknown and it's weak, right? But as for facing the east and the west, or the Qibla, facing the Qibla, we're going to get to that today. The author, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, to continue, that's the end of the review. To continue, the author says, وَلَا تَسْتَقْبِلُوا الْقِبْلَةَ وَلَا تَسْتَدْبِرُهَا وَلَا يَسْتَقْبِلُوا الْقِبْلَةَ وَلَا يَسْتَدْبِرُهَا بقول رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا تستقبلوا القبلة بغائط ولا بول ولا تستدبروها. Right, and the author Ibn Qudama, he says وَيَجُوزُ ذَلِكَ فِي بُنْيَانٍ. He says don't face the Qibla, or don't face the Qibla face on, and don't turn your back to it when you are relieving yourself, because of the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, don't face the Qibla with defecation or urination, or while you're defecating or urinating, and don't turn your back on it. And the author, he says, and it's permissible if you're inside a building. This hadith, the explainer, he says, this hadith is thabitun sahih. For Sahihain, yes, it's in Bukhari and Muslim. This hadith is in Al-Bukhari and Muslim, and I think it's in some other places too. Yes, he said وغيرهما in other places. The Sheikh, he says, Abdul Aziz al-Rajhi, the explainer, he says فيه دليل على تحريم استقبال القبلة واستدبارها عند قضاء الحاجة وهذا في غير البنيان. This hadith shows the impermissibility of facing the qibla, facing the direction of the prayer, the direction that you pray towards. It shows the impermissibility of facing the direction that you pray toward and turning your back towards that direction when you're relieving yourself. And the Sheikh, he says, Sheikh Abdul Aziz, he says this is outside of, this is when you are outside, not inside a building. This is when you are not inside a building. And this is the issue of ikhtilaf, as the Sheikh is going to mention. He says, أما إذا كان في البنيان فلا بأس به في أصح أقوال أهل العلم. The Sheikh, he says, if the person is inside a building, a house, a school, al-muhim, a building, the person is in some kind of structure that's built, right? The Sheikh, he says, in that case, it's no problem. And that's the most authentic statement of the people of knowledge. That's the most correct statement of the people of knowledge. وَالْمَسْأَلَةُ فِيهَا سَبَعَةُ أَقْوَالٍ لِأَهْلِ الْعِلْمِ. This position has 7 statements. The people of knowledge have 7 different positions. The people of knowledge have several different positions in this issue. فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ أَجَازَهَا مُطْلَقًا. Some of the scholars say you can face the qibla or turn your back on the qibla when you're using the bathroom. In general, it doesn't matter. It's permissible. Not that it doesn't matter, but it's permissible. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ مَنَعَهَا مُطْلَقًا. And some of them said it's haram in a building and outside a building. So some of them said it's permissible inside a building and outside a building. Some of them said it's haram inside a building and outside a building. Some of them, وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ مَنَعَهَا فِي الْبُنْيَانِ وَأَجَازَهَا فِي غَيْرِ الْبُنْيَانِ. And some of them said it's haram inside buildings and permissible outside of buildings. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ عَكَّسَ. And some of them said the opposite of that. They said it's permissible inside buildings and prohibited outside of buildings. That's the position of the Sheikh. The Sheikh, he says, وَلَكِنْ أَرْجَحُهَا, the most correct position, أَنَّ الْمَنْ إِنَّمَا هُوَ فِي الصَّحْرَاءِ. The Sheikh, he said that the prohibition is only in the desert. This is the exact wording of the Sheikh. That is only in the desert. وَيَجُوزُ فِي الْبُنْيَانِ. And it's permissible in al-bunyan. طيب. Translators, note me, I'm the translator. Does this mean that if a person is in the woods, that is permissible? If a person is in the woods, if a person is in the area where it's plains, the plane, not airplanes, but plains, flat grass, like that. What about if a person is on top of a mountain? Right? None of that's desert. Allahu Alam, I believe the Sheikh probably mentioned desert because he's Saudi, he's from Saudi Arabia. And as far as I know, there are no forests in Saudi Arabia. There are no forests in Saudi Arabia. Nor are there plains, as far as I know. No doubt there's some areas that are grassy and so on and so forth. Not all of Saudi Arabia is desert, right? But as far as I know, there are no woods, nor forests, nor rainforests, right? Nor plains and so on and so forth. So even if you're on a mountain in Saudi Arabia, you're probably in the desert for the most part. right? For the most part. Yani that's what's most. In any event, a person should be cautious. If you're not inside a building, you should be cautious. As the Sheikh is going to mention, the Sheikh is going to mention some other things that kind of make it clear that the Sheikh is not excluding forests and so on and so forth. No, if you're in a forest, you probably want to not face the Qibla. The first reason he says, وَيَجُوزُ فِي الْبُنْيَانِ, it's permissible inside buildings. So the desert is juxtaposed to a building, inside a building or a house, and so on and so forth. Anyway, the proof, that is permissible inside a building is the hadith of Ibn Umar. The hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar, radiyallahu anhu, is narrated in Bukhari and Muslim, where he says, ارتقيت فوق ظهري بيتي حفصة لبعض حاجتي. I climbed, I ascended the house of Hafsa for some needs that I had. فرأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقضي حاجته. I saw the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم relieving himself. مستدبر القبلة مستقبل الشام. He was facing the Qibla, and his back was to the Qibla, and he was facing Sham. Now in Medina, فدل على دل ذلك على الجواز في البنيان. طيب, from Medina, Sham is north. صح? From Medina, the Sham region is north. So and another way, مستقبل القبلة, the Qibla from Medina is south. The Qibla from Medina is south. Anybody who's ever stayed in Medina, when you stay in the Hilton, you go into the Hilton. You go into the Haram and you walk the Haram in Medina, and you walk the short distance of the mosque all the way to the front. You're walking south. Mecca is south of Medina. The Qibla from Medina is south. So Sham is to the north. The Prophet his back was turned south, and he was facing Sham. His back was turned toward the Qibla, and he was facing Sham. And this was inside a building. This was in Hafsa's house. The Sheikh, he says, this shows that the permissibility of doing this inside a building. The Sheikh, he says, because the principle is أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا نهى عن شيء ثم فعله دل على أن النهي ليس للتحريم، فهذا محمول على أنه إذا كان في البنيان لا بأس به وإذا كان في الصحراء فهذا ممنوع. طيب, the principle, one of the principles in the usul al-fiqh that the scholars use to extract the ruling from the proofs is that when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam prohibits something, when the Prophet prohibits something and then does that thing that he prohibited, that shows that action that the Prophet originally prohibited is not haram. It shows that it is makruh to the ummah. And the scholars, they mention that in terms of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, anyway, I'll leave that out. They say that it's makruh. When the Prophet says don't, like the Prophet said in this case, don't face the Qibla when you're using the bathroom, or when you're relieving yourself, when you're urinating or moving your bowels, don't face the Qibla and don't turn your back to it. However, in this hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has his back facing the Qibla while he's relieving himself. His back is facing the Qibla, he's relieving himself, and his front is facing north, facing Sham. Right? So we don't say that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did something haram. Right? We say that this action that the Prophet doing it shows that it's not haram. Right? Shows that it is for the ummah makruh. Okay? The Prophet doing the action shows that for the ummah it's makruh. after the Prophet prohibited it, then he did it. It shows that for this ummah, that action is not haram, rather it is disliked, what's called makruh. An additional benefit is that since the Prophet ﷺ is charged, Allah Ta'ala has charged him with relating this religion in its completeness, then the Prophet ﷺ has to clarify that that action is not, that thing that he prohibited is not haram. So the Prophet doing this action that he prohibited for the Prophet himself is obligatory to clarify. He has to do the action to show us that it's not haram, to show us that it is disliked, not recommended. The Prophet has to do the action. It's obligatory upon him to clarify. From the perspective of clarification, it's obligatory upon the Prophet ﷺ to clarify. And as a result of the Prophet doing the action, it shows that the action, after prohibiting it, it shows that the action is disliked. The Sheikh, he says, so this means that if a person is inside a building, it's okay to face the Qibla, to turn your back towards the Qibla. But if the person is in a desert, then it's prohibited. وَيُؤَيِّدُهُ مَا جَاءَ عَنْ مَرْوَانِ ibn al-Asfar. And what aids this is what has come from one named Marwan ibn al-Asfar, where he said, رَأَيْتُ ibn عمر أناخ راحلته مستقبل القبلة. Ibn Umar, radiyallahu anhu, he sat his camel down and he faced the Qibla, and then he sat down in a type of way, and then he sat down toward the riding animal, and he urinated toward the riding animal. This person Marwan, I suppose he's a tabi'i, right? He says, Ya Aba Abdul Rahman. Ya Aba Abdul Rahman. This shows the manners in addressing the scholars. Ya Aba Abdul Rahman. Alaysa qad nuhiya an hadha. Right? Shows a good way of asking a question. So he calls him, oh father of Abdul Rahman. Called him by his kunya, which is a way of showing respect. Alaysa qad nuhiya an hadha. Is it not the case that this was prohibited? Abdullah ibn Umar, he said, yes. It was prohibited. He said, إِنَّمَا نُهِيَ عَنْ ذَلِكَ فِي الْفَضَاءِ. This was only prohibited, and this was prohibited out in the open. When a person, this was prohibited. It's prohibited for a person to do this, to urinate facing the Qibla, or with his back toward the Qibla, to urinate or defecate with his back towards the Qibla, or his face or facing the Qibla. This was prohibited and out in the open. He says, فَإِذَا كَانَ بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَ الْقِبْلَةِ شَيْءٌ يَسْتُرُكَ فَلَا بَأْسَ. If there is something between you and the Qibla, covering you, between you and the Qibla, there's something covering you, he said, فَلَا بَأْسَ, no problem. The Sheikh, he says, فَإِذَا كَانَ بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَ الْقِبْلَةِ جِدَارٌ وَبُنْيَانٌ if وَالرَّاحِلَةُ مِثْلُهُ فَلَا بَأْسَ. The Sheikh, he says, if you have between you and the Qibla a wall or a building or a riding animal, a riding animal is like these things, no problem. La ba'as. Right? He says, وَهَذَا قَالَ بِهِ Ibn Umar. He said, this is the position of Ibn Umar. This is what Ibn Umar said. He says, لكن الأولى في مثل هذه الحالة أن لا يستقبلها لأن الراحلة ليس بنيانا. He said, it's better that a person does not simply use a riding animal. It's better that in this situation that the person does not face the Qibla, because the rahila is not a building. The rahila is not a building. وإنما البنيان كان وإنما البنيان, he said, the building, a built structure, a structure that's built ما كان محاطا من جميع الجهات, what surrounds the person from every different angle, from every different direction. What surrounds the person from every different direction. وقد كان أبو أيوب الأنصاري رحمه رضي الله عنه يرى المنع مطلقا حتى في البنيان. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, the great companion, may Allah be pleased with him, he took the position that this was prohibited in general. This was always prohibited, even inside buildings. Right? He said, he mentioned in the hadith, فقدمنا الشام فوجدنا مراحيض قد بنيت قبل القبلة فننحرف عنها ونستغفر الله. He said, when I went to Sham, when I went to the Sham area, and the Sham area is like Syria, Palestine, Lebanon, Jordan, that general region. When I went to the Sham area, he says, yani when we went to the Sham area, we found that the toilets with the stalls, the buildings around the toilets, were built facing the Qibla. So we turn a little bit away. We try to turn away from the Qibla, and we seek Allah's forgiveness. The scholars, this is a translator's note. The scholars, may Allah have mercy on them and preserve the ones that remain. The scholars mention that it's better, as much as a person can, to stay away from the differing. To stay away from the differing. Right? Perhaps in this position you can't, because some of the scholars say it's permissible to do everything. It's not permissible to do everything, right? But if you can, if you're building a house and you can choose to not make the toilets be facing the Qibla, or your back facing the Qibla, that's better, inshallah. Right? Anyway, type. When the person is urinating, the author, he says, Barakallahu feekum. Matter of fact, I think we'll stop here. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. I think we'll stop here. May Allah ta'ala help us. Give us success, rectify our affairs. Purify our hearts. Bless us and allow us to act on what we learn. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.